Hello, hello.
Ah,
Uh,
now we can hear you.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon. Some apologies for the cybernetic errors. Best research, dear Toni Malminen, where it is an honor for me, in particular, to convert the space for dialogue with Toni, and where, in particular, um, I must affirm that it reminded me a lot of the perspective of the Heraclius of the Ephesus when he fundamentally stated that no one can bake whites in the same river, and I want to rescue here the issue of the transmutation on space and time, and legal and social um, relations through the ages. Um, I make an emphasis on how legal for that forensic melodic, yeah, that's right. Forensic like Merrick had a historical root that can dismantle that apparently unquestioned vision during the modern times. Um, and inexorably, it seems to me that it is also necessary to take into account the Feuerbach contribution on history and education to have a broader vision of materialism that marked an important chapter in the legal field and post-Hegel in the Germany. Note, I want to bet on an epistemological tradition that is summarized in the following position. Need to interpret the reality qualitatively and qualitatively. Um, if, identify the main problems of the surrounding environment, put together an science program to solve them and move from idea to action. Obviously, they have to mistakes, but most important is to see later how the marching of error can be reduced through good legislative technique. However, I would like to know particularmente from two perspectives, uh, how is metaphysical and scientific rallies reconciled from an Scandinavian approach. O sea, the metaphysics and scientific rallies reconcile a Scandinavian approach. Uh, Thank you. Gives me 40 speech. Correct.
Sir, that's a good question. And once you start reading Axel Hegström, you immediately find out that this is a man, a philosopher, who is very much against metaphysics. So I believe Axel Hegström's idea, and this is how this relates to my point that legal realism should be seen as an antidote to fascism. I believe Axel Hegström felt that metaphysics is something that was an obstacle to social reform and for creating a good society. So he felt that he could find metaphysics in the teachings of the Catholic Church. He could find metaphysics in the philosophy of Hegel, as you mentioned, and many other German philosophers of the 19th century. And Axel Hegström certainly felt that this type of metaphysics mainly muddled our thought. It created confusion. So he felt that philosophies like that of Hegel or philosophy of the Catholic Church was mainly confusion and meant to confuse everybody basically except Hegel and Catholics themselves. So once you start, you perhaps know that Axel Hegström, he had a saying that you perhaps know the famous phrase of a Roman Cato saying that Carthaginians, he used to end every speech he gave saying that in other respects he feels that Carthaginians should be destroyed. It's a famous anecdote from Roman history. He said that whether he was speaking about weather or politics in Rome, he always ended by saying that otherwise he feels that Carthaginians should be destroyed. And Axel Hegström had a saying that he often wrote that otherwise he feels that metaphysics should be destroyed. So he certainly felt that once we have a sort of an empirical understanding of society, we can reform society, we can create a better society. And he felt that wars and many other social evils are created when people have these metaphysical ideas. And when he spoke about metaphysics, he was thinking of metaphysics like that of the German Nazi party, who had metaphysics of blood, German Aryan blood. So those type of philosophies that had these metaphysical ideas that couldn't be really empirically verified, but which had great emotional appeal to some people. So Axel Hegström felt that metaphysics, whether it derived from ancient Roman law or from philosophy of Hegel or from the teaching of the Catholic Church, it was confusion. And if we want to have a clear picture of society and reform society, we have to get rid of metaphysics. So, and okay, then what did he offer in the alternative? Well, that was basically an empirical view of society and law. Let's investigate how people are acting. What do people believe in? What kind of values people have? Let's look at these empirically rather than starting from Catholic social teaching or the philosophy of Hegel or ancient Roman law for that matter. So that to me is how Axel Hegström felt about metaphysics. And if you look at American legal realism, they had really no use for metaphysics either. So metaphysics was something German. It was something associated with Hegel and others who are quite difficult to read. Whereas American legal realists felt that, well, what should we study? We should study how people act, how judges act. Do people obey law or do they infringe law? And these are empirical questions. You can't derive answers from metaphysics. And they felt that metaphysics is merely an obstacle. It's just a big jumble of confusion. So that's to me how legal realists approached metaphysics. They were very critical of metaphysics. And of course, this idea goes back to some extent back to Karl Marx. If you know, Marx has a famous saying that religion is opium for the masses. So Karl Marx felt that why do people accept an unjust society? Why do people accept extreme inequalities of wealth and many other things? And he felt that one reason is that the church and philosophers are giving opium, intellectual opium, to the masses. Of course, he didn't mean that literally, that people are getting drugged by opium, but he said that metaphysics and religion are a way to give opium to the people. People don't understand that they can transform society, they can even start a revolution. And one reason why they don't understand that they have this power is because the church and religion are giving metaphysics and intellectual opium to the masses. So to some extent, legal realists were part of the same tradition going back to the Enlightenment, and Karl Marx saying that metaphysics is something that confuses people and reason why people don't demand new social arrangements and legal reforms. Any other comments,
Yeah,
questions?
that that's fantastic. Um, on the other hand, their college, I would like to tell you that technological changes and shaping the legal works as we know it. For example, artificial intelligence now allows robots to solve legal cases in China and other countries. From your point and view, how can the artificial intelligence revolutions of the 21st century modify the philosophical basis of the legal realisms? My friends.
That's an excellent question, and it's something that came up actually when I was visiting the University of Buenos Aires the last time. I met Sandra, who's a professor in family law and like issues, and she came to visit the seminar where I gave a talk, and she brought up artificial intelligence as well, and it's an excellent topic. And if you look that from a perspective of legal realism, you can actually have sort of two vantage points or two perspectives. On the other hand, it's a bit of a challenge to legal realism because legal realism, especially American legal realism, was of course also a theory of how judges decide. So they had an idea that politics, religion, values, and those type of things have an influence on judges and how judges decide. So they were very much interested in how humans reason, how humans decide. So that's psychology, human psychology, and judicial psychology. But if we start to move into conflict resolution where artificial intelligence and algorithms actually solve disputes, you no longer necessarily have a human making decisions and taking decisions. And at that point, of course, legal realism, because they wrote their main treatises 100 years ago in the 1920s, 1930s, they really had no view, and there's probably not that much that would be applicable to artificial intelligence and algorithms. So it could be that we need a completely new legal philosophy and a theory of how are legal decisions made once they are made by machines and robots and so forth. So one perspective on legal realism and artificial intelligence. And another perspective would be that, well, legal realism is a theory of how law functions in society. It's not theory about black leather rules in statute books and law books, but it's really a theory how law functions in society. And from that perspective, legal realism could be quite useful if we are looking at new technologies, because it's always a theory of what is actually going on in society and what things are shaping law and legal institutions. So once you start asking questions about how does technology influence law, how do artificial intelligence, how do they reach legal decisions, and how do they solve disputes, you actually have a legal realistic view. You start asking questions on how does technology influence our law and legal thinking. There's a fairly recent book. Let me just give you the name here on chat. There's a book by Finnish professor of constitutional law and legal philosophy, Properties of Law. That's the name of the book. It came out from Cambridge University Press last year. And what he's saying, there's a chapter on how technology is influencing law and legal institutions. He's basically saying that, for instance, this idea that law is somehow based on individuals, either individual judges making decisions or individual citizens either complying with law or infringing law. That could be an antiquated, old-fashioned way to view law, because in the future it could be that dispute resolution is basically somehow, as you said, made by artificial intelligence or by algorithms, and you don't have a human individual taking those decisions. He doesn't really give you a theory of how should we, what kind of law and legal thought should we have in the age of computers and robots and machines. But he's saying that technology is putting great pressure on our sort of conventional legal thinking, because you don't necessarily have any longer individuals taking decisions, but it's quite different. So if you're interested in how technology is influencing legal philosophy, Tuori's Properties of Law is quite a useful source.
Yeah. No, you mentioned and the need to study how people interact within social uh, hello frameworks, and honestly, various psychological currents on the 20th century focus in these issues, and seems to mean that is necessary to start a dialectical mixture between both disciplines with other. For example, in the economics, and go beyond what is founding fathers proposed more than 100 years ago. What do you think on this last idea? Excuse me, my friends and my doctor. Um, uh, the important what is the microphone. So, what is important? Um, the say the psychology social for the rulings juridic in these times. teniendo en consideración, o sea, de que, por ejemplo, the century 20 produjo, cosechó, digo, repito la pregunta mejor para tener una visión más concreta. No, you did mention the need to study how people interact within social frameworks, and honestly, various psychologists currents on the 20th century focus on the uses and seems to me tag in this necessary to start a dialectic mixture between the both disciplines with other, for example, economics and mathematics, and go beyond what is founding fathers they proposed more than 100 years ago. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think on this last idea, estimado, estimado doctor? Dear Dr. Toni Malminem.
Thank you, my friend. It's an excellent point, and I fully agree that one of the cornerstones, one of the key ideas of legal realism has always been that we need to integrate legal studies with other fields, including not only philosophy, but sociology and economics and so forth. So let me just give you a few examples. The first great law and economics movement in the United States originated in the 1920s and 1930s, and it was really a union or an alliance between legal realists and institutional economists, and that's individuals like Walton Hamilton and others. So legal realism was definitely a theory that we need to approach law empirically. And once we start approaching law empirically, we can't really focus only on the statute book, the law book, the black leather study of law. We have to study law from the point of view of economics or social psychology, sociology, and so forth. And of course, if you think like about the field like legal anthropology, what is really the great pioneering treatise in legal anthropology? Well, that's the book The Giant Way by Carl Llewellyn and E. Adamson Hobel. So that's two legal realists. So I do agree that legal realism, and it really goes back to what we discussed previously, that if you are against metaphysics and if you are against the teachings of the church and philosophies like Hegel, and if you want to understand how society functions and how law functions in a society, you really need to bring tools and ideas from sociology, economics, and other fields which investigate how society functions. So it seems to me that there's a sort of a natural fit between legal realism and other fields. And certainly American legal realists were really the pioneers of social scientific study of law, and therefore they suggested that we need to integrate other social sciences into our legal studies. And of course, again, if you look at legal realism in Germany, most people don't use a term legal realism. They have the free law movement. They have the early legal sociology of Eugen Ehrlich and other great German scholars, and they have the legal philosophy of Rudolf von Jhering. But this was, again, it was very much interdisciplinary studies. So the first legal sociologists in Germany were inspired by the free law movement, which was basically a German variant of legal realism. So legal realism was all about integrating other fields into legal studies. And if you look at the history of legal sociology or law and economics, you always come back to legal realists. And to me, that's something that we need today. And that's, for me, the future of legal realism. If you want to study the topic you mentioned earlier, and that's legal technology, artificial intelligence, robots, algorithms, and how they are influencing our society and our legal institutions, you again need to bring many disciplines, and you have to have a realistic approach to law and legal studies. So again, if we think of the future of legal thought, it's really, to my mind, it has to be a realistic take on how, for instance, technology or the climate change is influencing our world, and what is the role that law should play in today's society. And to me, legal realism is a more promising approach than, let's say, natural law theory or the legal philosophy of Ronald Dworkin. So that's my take. Really agree that legal realism was about integrating other fields into legal studies, and it still has great promise to my mind.
That's that's fantastic. Uh, yeah. Thank you. On the other hand, and when you mencioné, usted menciona sobre, por ejemplo, sobre un autor, the author Karl Marx, in many times, I believe that in his work, many times can be discussed about also many important contribution can be respect. Well, he was a writer and who was the son of his time. Es un hijo de su tiempo. Is son his time. Es un hijo de su tiempo. There are epistemological contributions that were recognized by intellectuals such as Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell reconoce la valía de importancia de la dimensión epistemológica in the obra, en la creation of intellectuality of the Carlos Marx. For example, his writing on the thesis on Feuerbach, sobre las tesis de Feuerbach, en Bruselas, that the subject en Bruselas, ¿no? Y donde dice, man, the human, change society and society change man. Entonces, hay, digamos, una cooperación entre ambos, entre la sociedad y el hombre. Ambos se cambian, los cambios son mutuos. Y eso, for me, is very reality in the 1900 and the 1945 en muchos tiempos, en very times in the world. Ahora, yo quería preguntarle otra cosa. Ahora, note, from his point of view, how does the dimension of morality intervene with the current of legal realism that you defend? The moral in the realismo en que usted defiende. O sea, ¿cómo interviene la moral? Porque es muy discutido. La moral objective and moral es subjective. Están en constante conflicto. Thank you.
Well, it's it's interesting that you bring up Bertrand Russell because I believe that in many ways he was in line with legal realists in a sense that he was also quite critical of metaphysics. He was quite critical of Hegel in the philosophy of history of Western philosophy, which was written in 1945, so right after the Second World War. And I believe Russell felt that these metaphysical ideas and metaphysics of Hegel had somehow influenced German society and paved way for fascism and Nazism. And so I believe he was in many ways in line with Axel Hegerström and others, trying to create sort of a common sense approach to philosophy and society, and feeling that the Catholic Church and metaphysics had brought a lot of confusion. And I actually, in the article I mentioned that was translated by Francisco in 2019, Scandinavian Legal Realism, Some Unfinished Business, there's a footnote saying that Karl Popper and Bertrand Russell were also critical historicists. So they felt that somehow Nazis had this idea that history has a sort of direction, and it's a direction of Germany having to conquer the rest of the world, the rest of Europe, and so forth. And they were critical historicists, saying that there's no direction in history, and history is what we make of it, and so forth. So to my mind, I would actually say that Bertrand Russell and Karl Popper, they were obviously not legal realists in a sense that they didn't write that much about law, but I think that they are part of the same contingent of intellectuals who are critical of metaphysics and want to have this sort of a clear, not confused view of society and morality. And to my mind, Axel Hegerström and Bertrand Russell and Karl Popper are on the same boat against fascism, against Nazism, against deep metaphysics of Catholic Church and the Nazi Party and so forth. So that's why I put a footnote to Bertrand Russell and his great history of Western philosophy. It seems to be part of the same movement from which legal realism emerged.
Fantastic. In this sense, Dr. Toni Malminen, we can summarize that the new current of legal rulings that our world must have to face the future challenges debe debe nutrirse de muchas disciplinas, o sea, como digo, ¿no? A ver, hay dos detalles ahí, o sea, in this sense, we can summarize that the new current of legal rulings that our world must have to have future challenges must be now reached by many disciplines, art, philosophy, history, religion, economics, intelligent artificials, and botanic o world, es más o menos la conclusión a la que puedo llegar. O sea, this conclusion, luego de this conversation and question con usted, estimado doctor, ¿qué opinan? What is opinion al respecto? ¿Cuál es su opinión al respecto?
Well, I believe we fully agree that it's as you said, legal realism. Yeah, it's basically we have two ways if we want to understand law and legal institutions and society. One is to have an empirical look at law and society. And you can have that look from the point of view of economics or sociology. They have their own concepts, but they are always interested in what is society, how is law functioning in society, what is role of law in society, or you can have that look from point of view of social psychology or behavioral psychology, or the point of view of legal realism. But you're always interested in what's actually happening in any society you are investigating. Or you have a different point of view. You may have a different point of view, and that's a point of view of religion and metaphysics. And that's supposed that there's a spirit, or there's some immemorial morality that we need to obey, that's binding on the humans, and you want to study theological phenomena and religious dogma, and that doesn't have that much to do with how actually people are behaving and what is happening in society. So that really seems to be like two alternative viewpoints, whether you are a realist interested in what is actually taking place in society, or whether you are interested in discussing natural law, religious dogma, the existence of angels and gods and demons, and that doesn't have that much to do with what's happening in any society. And legal realists were part of the first group, so they were always interested in what is actually taking place, what is actually happening in courts of law and in American society or Swedish society. But if you look at historically, many lawyers and legal philosophers have been more interested in dogmas and metaphysics and these ideas that have no really basis in society and that cannot be investigated empirically. So that, to me, is sort of the great question. Do you want to be a legal realist, study empirically what is actually taking place in our societies, and then you need to bring perhaps other disciplines like economics and psychology and sociology to assist in that study, or whether you want to debate dogma, miracles, spirits, natural law, timeless principles of morality, and that sort of stuff, which is perhaps completely legitimate. I mean, it has been done for thousands of years. So humans seem to have this need to discuss miracles and the existence of God, the existence of timeless principles of natural law. But it's really different debate from legal realism. And I, for myself, I've always been a legal realist. So what really interests me is how is law operating in society? How is society functioning? What is the role of judges in a democratic society? And these are really empirical questions. I've never been that interested in whether God exists or whether angels exist or whether there are miracles. That's why I've always been a legal realist as well.
Sí. Yeah, clear, fantastico. This fantastic. Thank you very much, dear Dr. Toni Malminen. Digamos, I uh, 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 yeah. I, I rescue eclectic methodology of the legal realism that mixes religions, what science, art with mathematics, a book back about old, debating on powerful development, the quality of a social este, scientific, social scientific. I am, o sea, yo apuesto directamente por fortalecer el realismo jurídico a través de la vocación de ser cientistas sociales. Entonces, eso yo lo que particularmente planteo, ¿no? Yo vuelvo a esto, ¿no? I rescue eclectic methodology and legal realism y I'm beating on powerful developing the quality of social sciences para todos estos problemas for these problems in the world, in the planet juridic, in the research, in the life of the country, of the people, of the economy, y obviamente en la Court Supreme in the United States. Entonces, por estas razones, by this reason, yo quisiera agradecerle, thanks very much, dear doctor, by the time, back the paciencia, por su paciencia, ¿no? Paciencia, y bueno, lamentamos lo sucedido, excuse me for the errors, technologies in these times, in my country, in the world, in this event, academics, very important for the students and teachers in el plano jurídico, philosophic and juridic in general. Entonces, sé que a pesar de que hay distancias, me gustaría retomar, volver en otro momento con mejores condiciones a un mejor diálogo, the best question, the best conversation, with best technology for me, for others, person interesadas in these themes, very important for the development in the intellectuality in the world de hoy, o sea, today. Mil disculpas y bueno, hasta una otra oportunidad. Excuse me, nuevamente, disculpe nuevamente, doctor.
Thank you very much. It has been a great pleasure, and don't worry about the technological issues. I always have them myself. I'm not at all good with technology, so it's been a wonderful discussion. And the word you said, eclecticism, that's a good word, because I do agree that if you want to study law and legal institutions, you have to draw from different disciplines and draw ideas from different individuals. And if you want to be inspired by legal realism, you can consult my book that's now available in Spanish. So it's something to look at if you really want to go deeper into legal realism. But it has been wonderful to present that book and introduce you to some of the themes in that book. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Toni Malminem. Thank you, Professor Luis Davidson Fernández. Now, to end this great event, thank you everyone present in this transmission, as well as the doctors themselves. Thank you very much for such an excellent explanation of the topic called Reflection on Legal Realism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And let's be in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, doctor. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.